It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is the one and only Bill Myers, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, Rendezvous with God, Volume 1, and it is a novel, not really a surprise for a book coming from Bill Myers. Bill, it's truly an honor to speak with you today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Now, Bill, I've been reading your books for many years. I first connected with your Blood of Heaven series way back in the 90s when I worked in Christian retail. But inevitably, there's going to be somebody watching this, listening to this, who says, I've never heard of this Bill Myers guy before. Maybe you just had never stepped into a Christian bookstore, or you just don't go into the fiction section. I don't know. But for the person meeting you for the first time in our conversation today, what are a few things they should know about you?
That I'm an imposter. I never intended to be an author. When I was 18, I was getting bored with Christianity, so I made a very odd promise. I said I'd never say no to you, God, whatever you want, regardless of how uninformed you may be of the situation. I Here I am. We do know about my writing skills, which are non-existent, the C's and D's I got in college. So, that's off the table. But boy, you call it and I'm there. And about 6 months later, I get a call from a publisher saying, "Hey, would you write a book for us?" So I start writing Bible commentaries, and then I just found that the parables, by wrapping truth in fiction, like a parable, it seems to stick more. So that's really been my focus. I've done worked a lot with children's projects. I was the co-creator of a kids series called McGee and Me, and wrote and directed a lot for Adventures in Odyssey, the radio series. But yeah, I guess if I had a mission, and it's in this book, by the way, it's just to draw the reader closer into the heart of Christ, the personality of Christ, not the theology, but the relationship, the to know what he's like as a person.
Well, thank you for helping us to get to know you a little bit better. Next, let's transition into the story behind the book. And you already alluded to this a little bit, but what kind of sparked this idea of this professor having these kind of ongoing exchanges with Jesus? Was there something that kind of planted that seed in your mind?
Yeah, yeah. I Several years ago, I wrote a novel called Eli, which is a retelling of the entire gospel as if it happened today in America. From his birth in the back of a Motel 6 laundry room to his lynching in the Bible Belt and everything in between. And I would get emails, and still do to this day, from people that say, "I've been a Christian all my life, and now I finally get it." So I kind of wanted to approach things, again, stripping away the religious veneer that we've coated Christ up in, and sometimes we protect ourselves because we say, "Well, that's." I just wanted to put him back in our face, like he was with the boys 2,000 years ago. So this reluctant professor who's I guess if you had to describe him, he's just a man who's constantly baffled by life. That's the comedy I'm able to use. I use a lot of comedy to get the medicine down. And he gets pulled back from time to time to time into Jesus's life in the New Testament, just when our lead character's life is about ready to go into another problem, he's pulled back and he sees a gospel account unfolding. And then once it's done, Jesus pulls him over to the side. Jesus is the only one that sees him. And the two of them have this wonderful conversation about how this particular biblical account really is just as relevant today in what our hero is encountering as it was 2,000 years ago. So, again, it's taking truth and wrapping it up in a certain amount of comedy, but in a story, and putting flesh and blood on it, so that it sticks and people walk away with a deeper friendship of Jesus Christ.
Well, and often I'm talking with nonfiction authors. In my job, I acquire nonfiction projects, so I'm not as aware of what goes into research and preparation for a fiction book. So, for you, with this kind of a project, like What's the level of preparation or research that happens before you begin writing?
Boy, when you put the words into Jesus's mouth, you you better be on your toes. I actually, as I said, start off writing Bible commentaries on Luke and John, and then the combination of Christ's life. So I have a pretty good knowledge of biblical knowledge of Christ. I teach a discipleship class at a prep school, so that's always the water I swim in. But then I did something I've never done before. Um, I would write myself into a corner, and then in prayer, I would say, "Okay, now what?" And so the book became a type of personal prayer for me. And I'm not, claiming divine whatever, though I hope there was some divine inspiration there. But it really became a whole new process of writing. So revealing to me that that I'm working on book number 4 now, and we've just released book number 1. But it's just this ongoing conversation, having the biblical background, but then just being free to explore Jesus in prayer and coming up with I think some relevant points.
And in terms of ideal reader or intended reader, I'm always curious to hear, did you have kind of that person in mind that you were writing for as you were putting this project together?
Um, yes and no. Um, if a person is no, I guess no. Uh, my agenda was again to make Jesus as personable and as much of our friend and our brother as possible. And I guess that could go across the board, whether it's a seeker or agnostic or somebody that has been hanging with Jesus all their life. So I don't know if I have a specific reader in mind, unless it's somebody that is susceptible to the truth of Jesus.
And in terms of characters, you've already alluded a little bit in some of your earlier answers to the main character. Give us two or three of the core characters that we're going to connect with in this story.
Well, yeah, Will is our primary character. Gee, where'd I get that name? Bill Meyer. Anyway, Will is our primary character. And he just doesn't understand women, uh, or anybody else for that matter. So he's kind of in a nice little bubble of intellectual community. And then his life is turned upside down on Christmas Eve when his 14-year-old niece, who's run away from home and is pregnant, says, "I'm staying with you." And so now, and the mother is his sister's pretty much made that clear that that's going to be the case. So now he's got a 14-year-old girl that he can't even keep up with a mature woman. And now there's all of this wonderful adolescent schizophrenia that he's dealing with as he's just trying to navigate. He's just trying to have a life, and all the things that pop up uh, are the reasons Jesus keeps going. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Come here. Listen. What you need to do here is this. So yeah. So there's Will. There's his niece who at 14 knows everything and is set out to educate him. And then there are a few other minor characters, but Jesus certainly plays a huge part in it. And Jesus uh, isn't always sober. There's a lot of elbowing in his ribs as Will reaches wrong conclusions. Well, Jesus, which is it? Is it A or B? And Jesus's answer 9 times out of 10 is bananas. Will, you don't even know how to ask the right question. So let's go through this again. So there's a certain whimsy, a certain comedy, never mean spirited, but just as Jesus gets Will to laugh at himself as he realizes that there's a lot of things he doesn't understand.
In terms of that main character, Will, do you write any of your own personality or quirks
No,
into the
never, never,
character?
never, never anything not me. No. Yeah, all the time, all the time. There's all these little facets that okay, now I'll explore that area of me or of people in my family, but they never read my books anyway, so it's okay.
Yes, we deal with all of our family and friend issues when we write fiction. We write them into the story, and
Yes, right.
so be careful. If you're friends with, you're related to a novelist, you may end up in a strange place someday and not even know it.
Yeah, and it's no accident that Will doesn't understand women, and that I have two daughters that still leave me baffled. They're brilliant, and I feel like a like like an elephant, and they have they have this gossamer thread, and they I'm trying to make a decision, or they ask me a question, and I'll go, "Whoa," and they're going, and before I know, I go, whoa, boom. So yeah, a little bit of therapy, I think, is in this book too.
Yeah, well, I have six daughters and a wife, so I don't understand women yet. I've been trying for 23 and a half years, but I keep pressing on. I figure
You know,
by the time
and
I'm a
what a
grandfather, I might slightly, just a teeny bit, but I might be
yeah,
overly optimistic.
and what a wonderful adventure, right? Discovering women.
Amen. It is never dull. It's
Yeah.
certainly never dull. In terms of like finding that balance, so you're writing a novel, you're also helping us to connect with a realistic portrayal of Jesus. Like what was that weird balance of kind of writing this fence that it's a novel but also study of Jesus, kind of story of Jesus? How did you find that balance, or was there any kind of a unique um, tension or frustration of having to write like that?
There actually, there wasn't. Uh, when you've been intensely hanging out with him for, in my case, 50 years, gracious me, 50 years, uh, you, it's like hanging out with a friend. You know the friend, and then you've got scripture to back you up in case you're going down the wrong road. So between that friendship and my own experiences with him in scripture, it was pretty seamless. Though, like I said, a lot of it was involved in prayer, just going, "Well, this is unusual. You got any clues on this one, Lord?"
And I always ask every fiction author I interview this question. Have you found through the years when you're writing that your characters take on a life of their own and things just go places you never expected when you were planning the project?
Yeah, yeah. If that doesn't happen, then you're manipulating the story, and you're not letting the story be organic and real. In the movies that I write, a lot of times uh, I have to manipulate characters because you only have 120 minutes to do it in. But in a novel, it's great just to develop them, and I'll take sometimes up to a month to develop characters, and then just sit back and put them in the room and see what's going to happen.
And in terms of the kind of off the record conversations that the lead character is having with Jesus, was there any one conversation that was the most difficult or maybe the most enlightening to you?
Yeah, yeah. Through the thread actually throughout the whole book is Jesus, and again, this is scriptural. Jesus is not so interested in the religious do's and don'ts, the religious exterior. He's more interested in the interior. He talks about, and I hesitate to say this because it makes the book sound too theological, like it's a theological treatise. It's not. Like I said, there's plenty of comedy in it. But the difference between behavior modification versus spiritual transformation. Behavior modification, that any religion on the earth does that. You change your behavior, you do these things, and this will change your behavior. And Jesus is again and again saying, no, that's my job. Let me spiritually transform you from the inside out instead of the outside in. And poor Will's trying so hard to be so good and religious. And Jesus goes, no, 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 no. That stuff happens. But let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about me inside you, transforming you and changing you. At one point, they Will accidentally brings a balloon back into Jesus's time, and Jesus is quite fascinated with that. And then, of course, a parable starts to bubble up, and Jesus says, this balloon that's just kind of this is like humanity without my breath in them. And if you let me fill you with my presence, you can push against the outside pressures of your life and you start to function the way the Father and I dreamed you would function when we created you. So that's sort of a reoccurring theme, is letting the intimacy of Christ, the abiding with Christ, take care of everything else. And Will learns that lesson a thousand different ways and still doesn't quite have it down, but at least he's pointed in the right direction by the time we're through with him.
And I was really glad that you wrestle with that in the book because I feel like for so many of us, especially when we start off early on in the Christian journey, we start dressing like everybody else and we start cleaning ourselves up so we can fit in. And we're doing things on the outside, sometimes to convince ourselves that things are changed on the inside. And not that it's necessarily bad to step away from maybe inappropriate or bad behaviors, but until there's that actual real transformation on the inside, we're just trying to make ourselves look like a Christian. We're not technically living out of that true, deep, full heart transformation that only happens on the inside. I feel like that's sadly a place a lot of people struggle to ever get to in their Christian journey. So I love that you wrestle with that in the book.
Yeah, and that would be certainly the theme of the book, because what we describe, working outside in, I mean, isn't that every religion on the face of the earth? Isn't that Islam? Isn't that Judaism? Isn't that Buddha? Everything is working outside and trying to change my behavior. And Christianity is about a person. It's about a person, a relationship, a friendship that changes us. It's entirely different, but it's so easy to get sucked into the idea that Christianity is just another religion.
Talk to us about kind of that closing dialogue between the lead character and Jesus, where they're wrestling with Reformation versus revival. I think that what fascinates me is we're at this interesting time in the church where I've got so many of my friends, talking about a new era for the church, really kind of a third wave Reformation that's on the horizon, and other
Mm.
people going wholeheartedly after revival. So I was very fascinated that you have this dialogue about these two topics that are coming up everywhere right now at the end of this book. And I suspect you wrote this book at least a year and a half ago. I'm going to guess, just with the normal publishing schedule. So in terms of the cultural conversation, you were ahead of the time with where the book is landing. So just tell us a little bit about that dialogue.
Well, again, it's the difference between, and this sounds cliche, but I don't know how else to say it so quickly. It's a difference between religion and relationship. God did not create us so that we could have a religion. He created us so that he could have a son, so that he could have a daughter. For the same reason you have all those daughters, is so that you can work with them, so that you can help them grow, so that you can fellowship with them. When your daughters visit you, you don't want them, okay, well, now we're going to wash the house or the car, and now we're going to mow the lawn. And it's no, no, just sit down and talk with me. Let's hang with me. Let's have a relationship. And so that's what Jesus is talking about. It's like, get rid of the outside in and get back into the inside out. That's what he taught. That's what he taught. Yeah. So that's yeah, our hero's all excited because he wants to turn it into a book, and says, yes, this is going to be this is going to be great. And Jesus, this is going to be a great revival. And Jesus kind of shakes his head, and our hero says, what? You don't want a revival? And Jesus kind of sighs and goes, I was hoping for a reformation. So yeah, yeah, I'm glad you caught that. And that's where we go with book 2 and book 3 and book 4 that I'm working on now.
And in terms of the reader's journey with the book, uh, if like what will how will you know you've succeeded? Like what's going to be different in their life, or how are they maybe thinking of their dialogue with God, their dialogue with Jesus differently when they close that back flap? Like what's that thing you hope every single person captures?
That God will be their friend. That God will be their friend. That God doesn't see, once we've passed our junk onto Jesus and are clean because of what Jesus did, God no longer sees what's wrong with us. He sees what's missing, and He's on our side. Even on our worst day, He loves us as intensely as on our best day. So it's just this friendship, this child father, uh, and not some religious nonsense that we've been sucked into, because it's a lot easier to be religious than to have a relationship. You just tell me 10 things to do, as a marriage. Okay, well, I'll empty the cat box and I'll do the dishes and I'll help there. Okay, good enough, right? And no, that's nothing to do with marriage. Marriage is that knowing, that intimacy. So that's what I hope people walk away with, is that God is their friend, God's on their side, and He wants that intimate conversation and relationship.
And Bill, you've already alluded to future books in the series. So you said you're working on book number 4. So
Yeah.
where are we going as we pick up each new book in the series?
Well, in the second book, his identity, Will's identity, is wrapped up, as with a lot of men, with what he does. His identity is what he owns, and his identity is in what people say about him. And none of those are who he really is, right? Who he really is God's favorite son, because God's infinite and he can get away with that. So in the second book, Will loses his job, he loses his reputation, he loses what he has. But that's okay. It's not a sad book, because he emerges bigger and wholer than when he was using those outside things to define him. Now he's enabled to walk as a beloved son. So that's the second book. The third book, I'm exploring prayer, and the fourth book is just starting it. That'll talk about community and service. I tend to be anti-community, not anti, but I tend to be reclusive. And so I know that's something I need to work on. So that's what the fourth book is Will learning not to be a hermit, not to be reclusive, but to serve and to see that the importance of a community uh, in the development as a beloved son.
Well, I think this series, Bill, is going to be a gift to the church. I love that you're taking us on kind of a spiritual formation journey with your main character. I love that you're going to go into kind of that stripping away of identity. I feel like that's sometimes multiple times we get to go through that in our life, in our journey. But that's so important because we do often just define ourselves by so many other things. And when all that gets stripped away, to some degree, I would say that was one of the weird sort of gifts of 2020 as we went through so many tense situations and difficulties, getting away from all of our normal routines. We had to wrestle with what does our faith mean, and what does it mean to go to church in a building or do it at home, or all of our norms were stripped away, and we had to do a lot of wrestling. We're continuing to wrestle in 2021 as well. So I
And
love that you're going to
emerge,
take us into your main character's wrestling.
yeah, and emerge free,
Yes.
freer of those things. Again, I work with high school kids. I teach this one class on discipleship. They are so tied up in what people think about them. It's an affluent area. They're so tied up with what car they drive, and it's like, no, you can be free of that. So yeah. And again, I wrote that before COVID hit. That was book number 2. So yeah, for whatever reason, I seem to be ahead of the curve, for better or for worse.
Well, it is uncanny how often that happens in Christian publishing. It's almost like God knows what's on the horizon because books will hit the market and it speaks to what we're struggling with, what individuals, society, the church is going to. And so I love that that is baked into this series that you've written as well. Bill, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, find out more about not only this book, but the many books and films, all the things you've done through the years, where are some of the places we can discover you on the web?
Yeah, it would be my homepage, Bill uh, Myers.com, Myers, BillMyers.com. I try to make a habit to answer all my emails, so my email address is bill@billmyers.com. And yeah, the book is out now on Amazon and all those places. And I got a couple of friends like Peretti, like Frank Peretti, wrote. He said, "I heard Jesus in this book." So I thought, okay, I like that. I like that.
Well, and any kind of praise from Frank is high praise, but that's an even uh, bigger compliment. I love that. In terms of connecting with Bill, finding out more, we'll have links in the show notes, places where you can connect with him on his website, links to places where you can buy the book. As Bill said, it is widely available wherever great books are sold. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Bill Myers. Once again, our book today was Rendezvous with God, Volume 1. And if you'd like to find out more about Bill and his many books, head over to his website. You can find that at billmyers.com, and that is Myers. So billmyers.com. And Bill, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun.